It's Taupori Tangaro and recording is in progress. My name is Taupori Tangaro and I am your Mōkaulele host. And I feel like my adrenaline is pumping because Noi Noi and I live on an island, but she lives up the mountain and I live down Makai, and we don't get to see each other all the time. But we've spent many years together, so we had so much to catch up. So I'm a little bit if I feel frazzled, that's because it's in part is my natural character, but then I'm also happy to be in community again. Mōkaulele. Mōkaulele is a way of hooking your storyline forward. Mōkau is a hook. Lele is the flying hook. And it's a story of Maui, the big trickster. And, it's a long story. And maybe I'll tell you that story one day. But the idea is, what are we hooking? We're hooking you. We're using other people's stories, like maunu. You go fishing. You throw maunu, you chum the water first. You attract the water, and then you put the bait on the hook, and then and then they eat. And they hook. So your maunu is Noi Noi's story. The hook is your story. We want you to, Mōkaulele is about revisiting your stories that sometimes we put on the back burner, then we forget to bring that forward because life happens. Or sometimes we're so busy contributing to the narrative of our children, our partners, our families, that we forget our own narrative, and we wake up one day and we feel a little lost in this large world. We're helping everybody get through, and yet we're the ones that left behind. We get everybody in a canoe and sailing, and we realize that, oh, I'm the last one on the island. So Mōkaulele is about bringing a community together and looking at a particular kind of story, the story of leadership. And for some people, as a raise of hands, or you have this little, at the bottom, you have your reactions here. Raise of hands, some people, they're extroverted. So leadership is something that happens outside. There's something that's happening outside of them. And then that triggers their leadership. How many of you are that? You need something outside of yourselves, and then you rather busy yourself with things outside of your body. How many of you are extroverted that way? Raise your hand. It's not a sin. My wife is very like that. Okay, raise your hand. Okay, are we all introverts? Oh, no, there's some extroverted ones there. Okie dokie. Then how many of you like to spend your time thinking about your inner developments before you act it out? And in fact, you don't like to act out unless it's figured out inside. The more introverted, the leadership. So raise your hand. How many of you play on that side of the field? Ideally, we need to get to the center. Yeah, we need a little bit of this and a little bit of that to get to the center. Mōkaulele is about that, hooking your storyline forward and asking you the question like, hey girl, so where did you leave off in your narrative? Sometimes you go to school, you get so busy getting a degree, you find out that after you graduate, you go, what am I getting that degree for already? Sometimes you get disconnected. So Mōkaulele is about getting reconnected. And Noi Noi will be sharing her story. Last week we had Roxanne that shared hers, and then Kekuhi, and then Presley. Everybody's sharing their stories. And what it does is it triggers elements of our own stories. And that's the magic of storytelling. So the University of Hawaii is committed to the building of Indigenous leadership. And we use storytelling as a way to elicit that forward and to grow that. Okay, so that's why this Mōkaulele, this Mōkaulele is it's not a side agenda. It actually directly aligns with the university's Hawaii Papokeao, the strategic imperative to grow Indigenous leaders. And so, it's not an afterthought. This is strategic. And so thank you for coming together. It's hosted by the Kipuka Native Hawaiian Student Center at the University of Hawaii at Hilo and Hawaii Community College's Iola Haloa Hawaiian Studies program. And that's it. Before we go on, I want to know where you guys from. We're gonna use the chat, but don't press, okay, work with me now, okay? Don't tell me where you're from yet. Is there Melanie Wilson, my dean, last week, she went stop too fast, she went press. So put in the chat where you're from and don't tell me Oahu. I like to know where in Oahu you're from, or on the continent, or where in Europe you're from, okay? But don't press send yet. I wanted to pop up all one time. So everybody, okay, so this is an interactive storytelling thing. And before we begin the story, we need to know where you're.
Is it okay for me to put in a wash?
Okay, so Gail, I can hear Gail doing her domestications. Okay, so are you ready? On the count of 3, press send. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Where are you from? Oh, this is not helping my caffeination. Kahului Maui Lahaina Hilo, originally from Wahia Waia Kea Kailua, Waia Kea Uka, Onomea. Oh, Halea Kala Maui. Oh, you live on a mauna. Wailuku, aloha from Munich, Europe. Aloha. Kea au, Kapolei, Kihei Kaiviki from Hana, Kilauea, Halea Kalaisi. This is great. Thank you for sharing that with you, with all of us. So I say aloha to you. We're going to be using this framework to frame the conversation. And it's a framework that I'm going to be asking that you use for a little while to look at your own storyline. This framework came from, it comes from the Pele and Hi'iaka epic journey myths. The very stories that talk about Hi'iaka's Pele starting off as a mortal and going through her life's journey and returning a deity. And Akua. In Hawaii, you look in the dictionary, the word Akua doesn't only mean God. It means to peak perform, to perform beyond the norm. That's Akua. So you can say, Wahana Akua Kelahana. Oh, you're sure performing, beyond the norm. You're pushing the envelope there. It's something we got to bring up. Okay? It doesn't always mean God. Okay. So and then Hi'iaka started off as a little girl, and then she went through her life's journey and went through all of those battles, and then she came back and Akua. Till today, I mean, we have somebody from Munich. Hi'iaka is known all the way in Europe through hula. Hi'iaka's name is worldwide these days. And it wouldn't have been if her journey wasn't a very good one. And so we'll be looking at the ka'au. We call this the ka'au, the myth of Noi Noi. But also, we're going to be looking at your ka'au. We want us to begin to look at our lives from the larger context, not from just a day-to-day, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that, but really your big story, the reason why you're breathing, the reason why you're here, the opportunity you bring to this world. That's what we're looking for. Not how well you can run a vacuum. By the way, my wife is still looking for the buttons. That a few months ago, she couldn't find the buttons to the vacuum. I bought a new vacuum. She had no clue. She doesn't know how it works. But hey, that's not her big story. So there'll be the hua. We'll be looking at Noi Noi's hua, her beginnings. And she's going to be focusing on her journey in academia, the ha'alele. What got her to going to step into academia, and then her journey. What was that like? How does the world benefit from your academic journey, your cultural rearing? Your ho'ina, how is your Hawaii a better place because of your journey? And then your ha'ina, what recommendations do you have for our grandchildren, the leaders we're giving birth to? How can we give birth to leaders? You see, if we don't give birth to leaders, we cannot expect the world to give birth to our leaders. That's our kuleana. Okay, not somebody else's kuleana. Okay, so we're going to begin there. If you have questions, you can put it in the chat. I'll be following the chat, and then also her email is there. If there's something you would like to, a conversation that you would like to carry on way after this, Mōkaulele, then she has a contact that you could contact her. And okay, I want to introduce my very, very good friend. Noy Wong-Wilson, like good friend. We've traveled so much, we worked so much, we laughed and cried while we're laughing. We worked and we cried while working. And so we grew a lot together. But let's begin with Noy Noy. Noy Noy, tell us, who are you and where are you from?
Oh my gosh, I thought you was gonna prompt me so this would be easy, but no, you just throw out the question. Okay, aloha everybody, aloha kako. And Tangaro, it is, even though we're on Zoom in this virtual world, it is more than enjoyable to just be in the same virtual space again. I know it's been a long time. So I'm Noi Noi Wong Wilson. I was born with the English name Michelle. So I have classmates from Kamehameha. My journey there in the late '60s on this Zoom. I saw some of my classmates. So I just want to say aloha to everybody. I was born and raised on Oahu and raised in Kailua on the windward side of the island in Ko'olapoko. Tangaro was likewise a couple decades later, at least one decade later, down the street. But he said Kailua was uptown, and he comes from down, the
Toy
yeah, the
Factory.
lower, yeah,
Factory.
Waiahole side. um, but that was my beginnings when Kailua wasn't the upscale suburban community that it is now. It really, really was a country. My father used to call it a two-horse town because literally we had horses in the front yard, had two on our street. And it was very rural upbringing, and the kind of upbringing that I eventually wanted my children to experience as life went on, and I started having children. And so in my adulthood, in the late 80s, 1989, was when we moved here to Hilo and to Hawaii Island. So that I could return to the place where my father's from. He's here from, born here in Napo'opo'o on the south side of this island, but also because there was a lifestyle here that I wanted to continue. And that was for my children growing at the time, they were, I think, 3 and 5 years old, would be able to learn to love the Aina the way we grew up and learn to be close to it, to spend their weekends and summers camping and out in the wilderness. And they would learn where they could raise animals. We could raise animals for food. They would learn that eggs came from chickens and not from the cardboard box at Safeway, and that the hamburger that they ate actually came from the animal that was grazed in the backyard. So that's really the very beginning for me. But I do. We have had a long journey. I just made 71 yesterday. It is my birthday late because I was still celebrating today. And so, I've been on this earth for 7 decades, and life has changed and a lot has changed. But I'm fortunate and I'm happy that I'm still here, healthy, and able to contribute and be a part of the larger community.
Mahalo, Noi Noi. Yeah, Noi Noi and I are both Pisces, and we're really, really proud of that. And so yeah, 71 years, 7 decades, that's definitely more chapters, yeah, that you have of an experience. So in this Ka'au framework, we're going to be looking at, again, 5 areas of development and actions, because again, this is about Indigenous leadership. It's at the end of the day, you cannot just have a conference of thinking about Indigenous leadership. They have to interpret into actions, and then we have to assess those actions and how they benefit our community. So Noi Noi, we're going to be looking at hua, the egg, the nurturing that you've had, the incubation. What was your early life like? What was your rearing like? And actually, guys, when I say guys, I mean everybody. So guys, when she's talking about her hua, I want that question, although I'm asking her, I'm also asking you. I want you to begin to think about your formative years. Yeah. So Noi, what was some of the essentials? What was your life like growing up in Kailua? And what were some of the essentials that you received in your formative years that has been consistent throughout your life, that has been sort of bedrock, no matter what job or where you are in the world? Because there was a time when you lived on the ocean with your family.
Mhm.
And you traveled on a little boat. That was your honua. But what were those essentials that were bedrock to Michelle, the Michelle from Kamehameha School, Kailua 2-horse town?
When I think about my hua and growing up and those elements that perhaps contribute to the way I am and how I relate to people around me. I grew up in the days in the 50s when we lived in a village. I had a large family that all lived in Kailua. And while we each had our own individual homes, each smaller family unit, my memory of my childhood is being together at my oldest auntie's house with all my 25 first cousins, and then eventually their extended families, and always growing up together. So that we ate out of huge pots that were cooked every day. There was a big stew or a big soup, and the aunties and my uncles, because in our family, Chinese Hawaiian family, the men did a lot of the cooking, but everybody, we were able to feed everyone who was there, and all the neighbors and their kids and their grandkids too. So feeding people and feeding families has always been an important part of my life. And I think part of that is because my father and his siblings grew up during the Depression years. And that's a generational trauma that he experienced. I didn't experience it, but I learned my ways of being from that generation that went through that. And that was, there was always food in the house that you could feed anyone who came in to visit you or to stop by. Food was an essential part of our living condition, and that carries with me even to this day. And when I was working at the community college with you, and I was running a program for student success, that was, I think, a big feature of what we did every week, couple times a week. I had a soup kitchen. I made fried rice, or I made big pots of soup. And the students, students are always starving, right? They never have money and they're always hungry. So feeding people was important to me, but it also served to attract people. It has served to build relationships, whether it was with students or just people in the community, that when you feed, then there's a reciprocation from them, right? Yeah. So that's one of the things about my growing up. And I think I passed that to my child, my daughter, and my son, and to other members of my family as well.
Yeah, we've benefited a lot from your feeding. You always had Simon under your desk, or some, always, and not only students, but faculty and staff sometimes were in there, because when you eat, then you have time to converse. And sometimes, we needed food to help the conversation along. And, or sometimes in a profession, you can get very isolated. Interesting, as soon as you have food and you put it on the table, the isolation dissipates and people come into communion and community. So that was, and then also, when we started to expand our hula program and we started taking our students who never left the rock, and we started taking them into the ocean, go visit, we didn't want them to only read about migrations. We wanted them to experience your Samoan cousins, your Aotearoa cousins, your cousins from Whakarava, so and then Japan and America, wherever we went. And Noi Noi was very instrumental because, she talks about her large family in one house. And I come from a large family, a very large family. But the difference with my family and Noi Noi's family is my family went nowhere. We stayed on the mountain. So, it was a little bit isolated that way, But Noi Noi had a little bit more access. And because she traveled the world, when we needed to grow what it is to be Hawaiian, that being Hawaiian is not just being isolated to a geography, but is knowing our place in the big ocean, knowing our relatives. So we started to do fundraising and look for money to get to traveling. Noi Noi introduced something into the process, and we call it ho'aumoi, where we would go, before we go on the journey together, 20 people on a journey, we spend a weekend with each other. So whether we're camping or we're sleeping, in one space, shared spaces, we're eating together. And so we know how we're at. So we know how as she would say, how they look without makeup. Yeah. Because let me tell you, how they look at school, when they come to school, is not the same when how they look in the morning when they stay cooking mush, because it's they get breakfast crew and they gotta cook. But that comes from her domestics, her rearing, and that came into academia, and we still practice ho'aumoi today, where we whether even if it's with faculty and staff, we do residencies where we get to know each other before we get on that canoe and sail to some place. We better know each other first, our strengths and our weaknesses, and always feeding. And if I had time, I would tell. I had so much stories about Noi Noi's feedings, but I'll save those for later. Noi Noi, you have. I remember when I first met you, and I found out that you worked for Macy Hirano for a while as an assistant. That kind of blew me away. And then your ability to work in. I mean, when my first workings with you, you were directing indigenous conferences, the WIPSI. That was, when I got to see this one person that was coordinating such a large community task. And I was really intimidated by that. But at what point, Noi Noi, did you, so that was your hua is your essentials, and we're focusing on food. Now we're going to be looking, you have such a large storyline, so we're going to focus on academia. Yeah. At what point, I do know, can you speak a little bit about how WIPSI introduced you into academia, and about, shoot us a decade, when was this? Because some people think you got to start school right out of high school, but you're good evidence that for some people, school doesn't happen right out of high school. So talk to us about your ha'alele, the point you began to invest in your culture through the academic forum.
Okay, so thank you. So I'm going to tell you really my life story in a capsule. I graduated from high school in 1968, and as you, I'm sure, are familiar, at Kamehameha, we're encouraged to continue right on to university and get your higher degree diploma. So I went to UH Manoa right from high school, and I spent the first year there of my university career. But I was there during the Vietnam War. And so you got to be about my age to understand what that means. But the America was at war in Vietnam, and here in Hawaii, we were influenced and we were a part of that. It wasn't something that happened elsewhere, like what's currently happening in Ukraine. We were very much a part, because it was a major stop off for troops and people going from the continent, stopping in Hawaii, and then heading off to Southeast Asia to participate in that. And I got caught up in the university student fervor about trying to stop the war and protesting. That was my first introduction to protesting at the time, which was in the late 60s, because it was really an unpopular war. What happened for me is I dropped out of school after the first year, and 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 became part of life. You know, I went to work. I spent a little bit of time in California and then returned home. But I started working. I didn't think school was the place for me, as sometimes our students discover that when they first come to either college or community or university, and for me it was not the right place to be. So I went to work. Now I had careers over time in the insurance field where I learned how to work in an office, and I got some skills in bookkeeping and accounting. And then I went to work for Hawaii Visitors Bureau, and because I just wanted a change in my life, and ended up spending 12 years in the visitor industry, where I rose from an entry level position to become executive secretary at a hotel resort hotel on Kauai, and then director of sales and convention services. And so those jobs that took me into my 30s. By this time I was in my 30s. I acquired skills in all of those different positions that I just put in my basket, right? All the different experiences and the skills, and particularly the one where I was the convention services director, because that was a huge coordinating job. I had to coordinate all different aspects of the hotel resort I worked for and the client, and do something pleasing for the client that we're working with, which are usually meetings and conventions. And then I got married and started having children. So that put a pause on my time in the visitor industry, because it was such a fast-paced kind of job, and people working in the hospitality industry find that their busiest times are the weekends and the holidays, when most other people are home, or the families are home. So it's really not a good kind of job for families raising young children. And I decided, okay, I needed a change in my lifestyle. And I moved back from Kauai to Oahu, and got married at this point, and then had my first child. So I, as a lark, applied for a job at Mazie Hirono's office. She's now our senator in Congress, but at the time, she was in the House of Representatives, and she was, I think, only in her second term. So she was a young House of Representative, and I walked in and applied for a job, and she hired me. My job at her office was to greet people and to file. At that time, of course, nothing was electronic like it is now. So all the bills were in paper, and they were numbered. So files were kept in numerical order in hundreds of binders in the front room. And that was my job. Put everything in numerical order and greet people when they came into her office. But because it was such a simple job, after I had been doing some, more way more complex kind of work, I started reading the bills, right? Nothing else to do, read the bills, and then follow her to her meetings and listen and take notes. That turned in the next year, when she had a more important position in legislature, allowed me to be her committee clerk. So if you are familiar with the legislative process, the lawmakers don't do the work all by themselves. They have a big staff that helps them to organize themselves and to get the paperwork all done. So that's what I did for her. But it gave me a whole different set of skills, and that was understanding the legislative process. So life went on. My next job was with the State Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. And so that was an easy transfer from Mazie's office at the legislature to the State Department. And that job at DBED led me to Hilo. There was an opening here, and I was asked to move to Hilo and to open their office here, which I did. That was in 1989. I stayed with the the department for just a few years and decided that now that I had found a place to live, that I wanted to raise my family, that was here on Hawaii Island, I could leave. I could leave that and go off on my own. So as it turned out, going off on my own meant that my husband and I decided, and this is when Makali'i was born, the Makali'i canoe. And we decided that we would spend the next few years of our lives from 1993 to 1995 traveling, 1995 to 1997, traveling the South Pacific. So we did that on our boat. And that was a huge learning experience for us. Being a part of that South Pacific, where we got to know people from all the various islands and lived in the villages, So all of my life experiences started gathering together. It was when we came home from that trip around the Pacific, when I came home to Hilo, and the first thing off the boat, people said, "Are you going to help the Kanaka'oles? They're going to put this world conference together in a couple of years, and maybe you can help them." I think her name was Gail Makuakane London. Yeah, she said, "Okay, can you help with this?" And I said, "Oh, no, I don't think I'm ready." I was going through culture shock coming back to America and back to civilization the way we know it, with our what I call conspicuous consumption that we in the United States have a habit of that I didn't see when I was traveling in the Pacific. So at first I didn't want to do it, but then finally I was convinced to go to a meeting, and I went to that first meeting in 1997, and I met this woman who I knew of but had never met, and her husband, and that was Edward and Pualani Kanahele. And I went to their meeting, listened to what they had to say about needing help to put together this huge conference, World Conference on Education. I went home and I called Gail Makuakane London, and I said, "Oh my God, Gail, I think I can help them, but what am I supposed to do? Just walk in and say, 'Hi, my name is Noi Noi and I can help you?'" She said, "Yeah, perfect. That's what you should do." And I said, "Oh my God, really?" So I went and I thought, no, I got to write something down. I wrote out a whole proposal, a couple pages of who I am, how I could help them, what we could do. And I said, I called them up. I said, gave them my name. I said, I was at the meeting. Can I come talk to you? They said, sure. And I went to Panaeva, and that's, I think, when you saw me for the first time. Yeah. And I thought, I don't even want to hand them this piece of paper. I'm just going to tell them I'm here to help you. And they said, okay. I said, just like that. Okay. They said, yeah. And so the little house on the side was the house, the office that was, still there. So I said, all right. They said, this is your office. Just start working. And oh, by the way, we don't have any money, we have to write grants and try and raise some money to do this. And I thought, who in the heck puts together this big kind convention in a little over a year, right? Oh my goodness, this is going to be a tough one. But I decided to go for it, and we did. And that's when I met Roxy and a whole bunch of other people from Hilo and all of you, Tongaro, Kikuhi, all of us. We just threw ourselves into it and did the best job we can, which ended up being a fabulous job, right? We turned Hilo into a village, and we pushed ourselves and everybody we knew as hard as we could. And it was still to this day, I think, the most fabulous gathering of its kind in Hilo.
It was pivotal,
Yeah.
and it had, and we're speaking of WIPSI, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. It has
Yeah.
it became the precedent. What we did in Hilo is now the precedent by which other indigenous peoples host. And so, yeah, very Kanakaole, very Kailua Oahu, feed everyone, you know, very,
Yes.
yeah, we got 1 year. My mother-in-law liked those truncated dreams, you know, she got a dream and then boom, and, you know, get it done and just go for it. But it became a measure. And
Yes.
so before we go even, so now Noinoi shared with us her hua, yeah, her formative years. And she talked about her core essentials, and she talks about village and feeding and you know, there's a reciprocation that happens. And then, and as she started to share her ha'alele, how she went from, you know, her experiences, and she putting all of these experiences in her basket, in her eke, yeah, and then travels the world, live amongst villages, and again, now it's the big village. So there's this theme that's reoccurring. Now I want you to begin to think in your look at, are there themes in your life that are happening? Are some of those essentials that you've experienced playing out? Some of you are young, and sometimes we get very, very impatient with the Z generation and the you know, and they want the idea of 7 decades to collect experiences is a little bit kind of far for them, yeah. But you know, this is how it works out, and so it's very clear how each job contributed something. And when we look at Whipsy, you can see how each job contributed to her capacity to do Whipsy and facilitate Whipsy, and how many people benefited from that. The whole indigenous world from this area of our world has somehow been affected by that. The ripple effects was large, and it still drives our experiences. In fact, some of the things that were done at Whipsy were done on the Mauna, some of those rituals. It still is going on. Now, before we go on, this is going to be one of the activities I'm going to ask you. I want you to reflect to your hua. Yeah, your time of being home, however you define home. Yeah, we have homes are defined and families are defined differently these days. So however you define your space of your formative experience, what would you say? Now, don't be quick now. I like to count 1, 2, 3, boom, and then you press, yeah. What would you say is core to who you are? And it came from, see, we have a nature. We're born, our nature determines this, but our nurture is what either grows the nature or truncates the nature. So in Noinoi's case, it was to feed people was in her bones. But when her family nurtured that even further, so now it becomes a salient part of who she is. So what is your nature core, and how is that supported by your family? If you had to put your finger on one thing, what is core to your character? Are you ready? And tomorrow can be another thing, so don't feel like you got to get the right, only one. You can choose one today. Okay. So ready? 1, 2, 3. What is your core essential there? Kokua malama aras, feeding. My mom, take care of those in need, understanding kokua, honesty. Community is very important. Malama, to serve, mental health, add value. Look at that, empathy. Make sure people's mental health is pono. So that means this core, no matter where, if you're a staff member, an instructor, an administrator, this core is going to be, whether you're mother, father, auntie, uncle, this core is going to be what people know you for. Yeah, I would never ask my world, what do you know me for? I think some of those memories are a little skewed, but it doesn't matter what. I think the thing is, what do you know? I mean, we want you to write your own story and not allow your life to be interpreted by other people. I mean, they can contribute interpretations, but that shouldn't be your core narrative. Trust your story to no one. So make sure you get your narrative together. And so that is your core. Your ha'alele. How many of you, we're going to be looking at, I want you to choose one experience, whether it was in high school, a class, or it was a job. What was one thing you learned outside of the home that you put into your basket of experiences, and now that it has triggered something that wasn't triggered in your home, it was triggered outside. Yeah. Interestingly, not everything we need is triggered in the home. Sometimes it's the community around us that triggers it. So why don't we honor that community? What one thing did you learn and who taught it to you? Ready? 1, 2, and 3, go. Working, Coco. Here's doing all these one word thing. Education. Uno, no judge a book by its cover. Forgiveness, connection. Makali'i ohana. Okay, connection. Okay. What's your function? Oh, I know what that came from. That came from white people. There's a wild Filipino Hawaiian man that just used to tell people, what's your function you're doing down here? Oh, that, and that's what we ask our students now. What's your function you in this class? What you doing here? You got to have a big reason to be here. Other than that, this class is going to just tire you. Yeah, you're going to find every reason to leave the class because you don't have a reason. Find your reason and the class will become easy. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go into the hua kai. The hua is, again, you have hua kai. Kai is sequence. Hua is, there's a sequence of smaller journeys. Yeah, our life, there's one big story and then there's a lot of them. That's a macrocosm. Then you have the microcosm. Every chapter kind of reiterates and grows this big storyline. So noi, we're going to focus your hua kai in academia. And just for the sake of the time here, can you please tell us, what was your academic journey like? One, why did you enter academia? What was the reason you did? Can you share with us those moments when you were in the journey of being a student and you knew you were on the right canoe? Everything felt right. And then can you also share with us those days when you looked up and you looked into the mirror and you questioned yourself, am I in the right place? And what were some of the punches you had, that your spirit had to take just to, because who goes through a journey without bruising? There's always some kind of bruising. So can you share with us, because sometimes our students, they get the first bruise, that's the first week in school and they leave after they put the whole canoe together, they get one little and they jump ship. I've got to figure out, no, get back on that core canoe. Get back on that core canoe and you're gonna land it. Okay, can you share with us why you went to school?
Sure. Okay, so that's perfect because I just talked to you about, doing WIPSI in 1999. Somebody asked the question what year that was. And boy, we thought we were indestructible, all of us. We had worked so hard, but we pulled off this miracle, right? And for me, it was like you said, the result of all of my experiences up to that time, in work and in my life experiences, and I had all these tools that I could use to help to manifest that. And after that, right after we were finished, Uncle Ed Kamahele, bless his soul, gave me one big gut punch. He said, well, now what are you going to do? And I said, oh, I don't know, look for a job, like a big, permanent job, like maybe work with you guys. And he said, oh, no, we cannot hire you. And I said, excuse me? He said, you don't have a degree. You have to have a degree to work with us, to continue working with us. And I said, but I didn't need a degree to do WIPSI, but you're telling me I need a degree? He said, we work for the university system. You have to have a degree. So if you want to hang out and keep working here, then you have to go back to school and finish your degree. And that's what motivated me. Part of it to me was the challenge. He threw down the ihe, right? He threw down the spear and he challenged me. And I thought, oh, what the heck? By this time, I forget how old I am. I'm 48 or something, 49 years old. And Uncle Ed told me he cannot hire me because I don't have a degree. So that's when I went to go talk to Gail Makua London, who had been an integral part of the WIPSI coordination. And she gave me some advice, and then I decided I would enroll at UH. I had collected more credits working with you, Tongaro and Kikuhi, because you were teaching classes, and we were forcing the students who were working with us to go to class, right? we forced everybody to take these classes. So I took them as well and earned more credits. And so I ended up going back to school at UH Hilo and finishing my bachelor's degree when I was 50 years old. It took me 3 semesters. It was hard work, but I made the commitment I would just go for it, not go to work, and just just power through, which I did. And I focused on cultural anthropology, Hawaiian cultural anthropology, and finished my bachelor's. But from there, I looked around and I said, I want to do what Kikuhi is doing. She was now at this time we're forming more formally the Hawaii Lifestyles Program, and uh, that was the early days before it was called Iola Haloa. And so I saw that and I thought, okay, I want to do what Kikuhi does, but then you have to have a master's. So I thought, okay, that means I have to continue and get my master's. And so I did. I applied for the master's in Pacific Studies. Now I just spent 2 years just prior to this in the Pacific, and on my own, I studied what the Pacific was all about, all these island nations, their history, their politics. And the classes I took at UH Hilo fed that program. They trained us. Craig Severance was the professor that trained us to be able to move into the Pacific Island Studies Master's program. So I did, and I was able to uh, finish my coursework in a very short period of time. And then I did what they always tell you not to do. Instead of just finishing, taking a semester to write my paper, which is a requirement, and finish my degree, I instead gave in to the invitation to come and teach Hawaiian studies classes at Hawaiian history. I started with Hawaiian history. Come teach the Hawaiian history class at Hawaii Community College because the person who was teaching had just decided not to take the class, and it was the week before school started, and they begged me to come and teach. And so I said, okay, I know this is not a good thing for me personally. It's going to mean it's going to take me longer to finish my master's program, but I did. I ended up teaching, and I taught Hawaiian history classes and became a lecturer at the Hawaii Community College, and then started teaching Hawaiian studies classes as well, and eventually did finish my master's program. By this time, I was now a faculty member at Hawaii Community College, but I was in the classroom. And then because there were so few of us at the time, we were tasked to do a lot of other extra work. And I used to do lecture programs very similar to this, but not on Zoom, more in person, and invite people to come talk and on different subjects. And because I was teaching history, I was very interested in, of course, our political history and making sure our young people understood who they were, especially Hawaiians, understood that our history and all the issues that were facing us as a community. And then it led me naturally to I just thought, well, why give up now? Just go get your PhD, girl. Because, it's a whole different level of commitment. But when you have your PhD and you can sit at the table with other people who really make decisions that guide our lives in academia and in our communities, it can make a difference. And what we saw was there weren't enough of us. There weren't enough Kanaka. There weren't enough Hawaiians. There weren't enough community people willing to go through the process to get that palapala so they can sit at the table. And that's from the community perspective, from the large perspective, that is what we're looking for. That's what we need to do so that we can be more self-determined. So, that goes off in a whole nother direction. But yeah, that was my journey. And that's what I did. So I ended up University of Waikato They just happened to start a program at the University of Waikato in New Zealand, which made it easy for me to be a student and actually continue working at the community college. And now that I had my master's degree, I was able to manage a federal grant program and do some of the work that was dear to my heart, which is to open up the Halaulani Center for Native Hawaiian Student Success, which operated during the time that we had the grant. And that's what I did for a number of years.
Okay, so I like that the fact that you said there weren't enough Hawaiians and I would assume at certain levels. And
Right.
and what qualified those levels in academia are degrees. So so if you wanted to be at this table, you need to get this kind of experience. It's not very unlike halal. Kumuhula talk to kumuhula. Yeah. Olapa talk to olapa. Oftentimes I have to mentor people in graduate school, and so I use the halal system to help them understand how it's also very Hawaiian. You don't talk. It's our culture to know who we can talk to, what tone we can use, when to talk. There's a whole culture of communication, and in academia, what gets you to even for consideration is the degrees you hold, and so. I like the fact that, you said there weren't enough people at the table that would make decisions that would benefit us. There weren't enough Hawaiians at those tables. So what do you do? And remember at the beginning, we talked about growing our leaders. We got to give birth to our leaders, that it begins inside. It's our kuleana. It's not somebody else's kuleana to develop our leaders. It's our kuleana. Well, this is a case in point where she says where there weren't enough people at the table. So what am I going to do? Scream about it or hunker back down and get back to work and go through one more leg? How many journeys did the Mōkaulele go through? How many times did it have to prepare a journey, get on a journey, hit the waves, hit the doldrums, nearly capsize, come back with all these life enriching experiences only to begin again, different destination. Okay, we descend from that. Every one of us, we descend from those migrations. Peoples, I want to take some time because this ka'au, we always have to offer, in the traditional ka'au storytelling, you would tell stories. Yeah, we tell the story of Pele. It would take a while, and it would be a certain space. It would be a sacred space because it's a sacred story. It's about the developmental and the guidance of the spirit. So it was never taken lightly. The ambiance had to be built and sacrifices had to be given to ensure that the reciprocation, as Noi said, she talked about feeding as a reciprocation. So I'm going to prepare a sacrifice for you. Are you ready? Because this is the contribution back. Right now, every one of us will have an opportunity to honor in name. And if the name is a little bit too sketchy, you don't want to share the name, give us an alias, but at least But I want you to offer up the name in gratitude of a person that challenged you, perhaps to the point of tears, that threw the spear down and says, pick it up. Or made you jump off the cliff because you wouldn't jump, or made you climb the tree because you wanted that mango, but it was only on a top branch and nobody was going to get it for you. So this is when, and we hated this person. For some of us, like, oh, this person just, but years later, just go, wow, thank you. Luckily, like my father-in-law, very nurturing. I cannot tell you the same reason I'm here today, largely because of that man and his capacity to challenge people in ways that made people rely on their strength and not on the challenge did not reflect fear. It was all hope and promise. So we're going to honor the person that challenged you, whether it left a good challenge or it was a negative challenge. A challenge is a challenge, whether you enjoyed it or not. So we're going to be putting the name of the person, and don't give us the whole Genesis to Revelation. That's your story. We're just going to say, and what we're going to say thank you to this person. Yeah. Thank you to this. So that, oh my goodness, that professor that told me, I don't know how you came this far in academia. Oh, you know, when I became a doctor, I just wanted to go back to her offices and see how far I came. But I said, no, that's all right. It's not about that. She she echoed a fear of mine, a fear of not succeeding. That was my issue. So we're gonna put down the name of the person that challenged us, whether you enjoyed it or not. And we're gonna say thank you. Because of you, my community is better. You triggered something in me, and now I can benefit my community because of that challenge you gave me. Are you ready? You can put first and or last name, no social securities, and then if the name is a little bit too taboo, give him an alias. Okay, ready? Oh, try wait there, you guys. Ready? I'll count to three. 1, 2, 3, go. Give me a name. Who it is, people? Say mahalo to them. Mahalo, Emerson, mahalo, Emerson, mahalo, namahana, mahalo, Roy. Oh, yes, Roy. Oh,
Oh,
look at
hi,
me.
poor case. Yeah. No, mine was Uncle Ed. I mahalo him all the time.
Oh, mine was Auntie Nalani Kanakaole. She told me, when I tell you jump in the fire, jump, you're not going to burn. I wasn't sure she was talking metaphorically or she really wanted me to walk on fire. It's been a few generations since I've done that, but it got me to jump. All righty, mahalo. So we honored those challenges. Let's honor those challenges. Sometimes those challenges are our partners or sometimes our children. Oh, Lord, those are the hard challenges when they're blood relative, yeah? When they're not relative, you can walk away from it, but when they're relative, you got to feed them still yet. Okay, now, Noi Noi. We've alluded to it, we spoke to it. Wait, let me back up. We're still in the Huakai. Can you share with me a day in your journey, your academic journey, where what was your lowest point in that journey when, it's like when the Makali is heading in this big wave and they don't know if they're going to capsize or not. It's all in the hands of the Aumakua at this point. Did you have those moments when your your fears guided the day?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Both in my master's program and in my PhD program, there's a lot of writing involved, research writing, right? And your writing has to be of a caliber that you can submit your papers or your chapters as you write, and they're reviewed by others who have already achieved that status in their communities. They already hold PhDs, and then they mark your paper and they tell you whether you're doing a good job or not, or whether you're being challenged, or whether even the content of what you're talking about is something they agree with or not. And it can be a very frustrating experience. It is probably the most difficult experience I ever had in my life was my PhD program. Not only physically it was exhausting, because I also remember I'm in school in New Zealand and I'm coming back and forth. I'm flying back and forth. And while it sounds very romantic, it's very taxing and physically challenging, costs a lot of money, more money as time went on, more money and longer than I expected. But people say this from the beginning, and it's very true. A PhD program is a very personal and very isolated journey. It's not a group. It's not a group journey. You may be in a cohort or a group, and everybody is doing something similar, but the it's like running a marathon, I suppose. I've never actually run a marathon because I don't run, but I mean physically, but that same, if you can imagine the journey that marathon runners are on, it's them against the distance. Nobody's going to carry you. They can't. or you're disqualified. You have to do it on your own. And I tell you, there were lots of sleepless nights. Um, Maybe not so much physical tears as opportunities when I looked in the mirror and thought, do you have it in you? Can you do this? You know, are you smart enough? Are you committed enough? This is a hard emotional journey, and is my writing good enough? You know, are my thoughts, and because when you write, it's like any writer for anything, you put your soul on that piece of paper. And then more so because I was writing in a manner which is an indigenous approach to writing a PhD thesis, and I put my personal self in it. So I was exposing myself and my innermost thoughts and feelings, my family, some of these things that we're talking about. But you know, I think where we are today, this is a friendly group and a safe group, and so there's not the fear. But when you write your PhD and you submit it, um, there you don't know if you're in a safe place. You really are exposing yourself. So, you know, for a lot of us, a PhD journey is not something that's in our future, but it is just an example of facing, for me in my academic journey, you know, that really fearful place. You stand on your own 2 feet and you pray your ancestors are going to be there with you. So all the protocol, all the ritual, all the prayers I learned through my association with the Kanahole family, all the training I had with all of you, Tangaro, Kikuhi, Ma, um, you know, those were not things that were only done on auspicious moons. They were things that were done every day. And I had to rely on that. And to this day, I rely on the ritual, the aha, and the prayers and the pule to reaffirm my own commitment to what I'm doing and where I'm going. And, you know, especially, I mean, that I'm not talking Mauna, but and not just Mauna, but other things. But yeah, that was, I think, the tough times. And then to pull it through and then to finally finish and to submit that paper and have people validate you and saying, yes, your work is good, you know, even your work is brilliant, and it passes, and then go through the ceremony of getting your cap and being recognized, I think was just, yeah, something that for me personally was extremely rewarding.
Mhm. You chimed on something that is echoes an important piece of the journey, life's journey. I mean, we spend our lives journeying with community, but there are moments when we're the only ones on the trail because where we're going is not meant for anybody else to go. We're the only one. All indigenous people have this process around the world. Some people call it the rites of passage. It's actually built into the culture where you, at a particular age, depending on the community, people are set out into these single person journeys. And some of them are life defying. They may not ever come back. But Hi'iaka, the best thing, and I put it in the chat, and it's one of my best proverbs. And she says, somebody asked her, what was her journey like? And she says, Olelo ikeaka kahele ho'okahi. The person that's on this kind of journey, they only have their spirit to talk to. But I want you to look up in the dictionary the word aka, because when we use the English word shadow, we think, oh yeah, the shadow that's following us. Well, that's one aka. So you get homework, even though Mōkaulele is a free thing. This is consider it an early Christmas gift. I want to give you homework. Go vehevehe.com or .org and look up the word aka. And you'll be surprised that what shadow means to some people does not mean what aka means to some is a shadow. What aka means to us is something much bigger. And so, and it is scary because soon as we come out, we're born into community. So how do we, some of us don't know how to talk to ourselves. In fact, that's why we marry 3, 4, 5 times, because we don't want to be alone. Yeah, we don't like the conversation, so we just get married again, find somebody else with a better conversation, and you get tired of that. And but you know, some of these journeys are very lonely journeys, and you can be in community and yet still be very, very isolated. And that is part of the process. And isolation can work against us when we lose ourselves to it, when we don't know why we're there. That's when isolation can become very, very dangerous. But when we know the big picture in life, what is our big contribution? What are the essentials? What honor do I have standing here today? What do I bring to this world? What gifts do I bring to this world? Then isolation is only an opportunity to clarify those gifts. And you know, and so, you know, but I love that saying of Hi'iaka. Olelo ikeaka kahele ho'okahi. Sometimes all we have is our own spirit to talk to. But when is the last time we talking to our spirit? Sometimes we forgot that we even have one. We've neglected our spirit for such a long time that we go around the world looking for it, only to know that it's very, very close. So that's the importance of this, you know, the spirit back in academia. And thank you, Noina, for bringing that back in. And that's one of the benefits Indigenous people bring to academia. Because academia, the history, if you understand the history of Western academia, they took the spirit piece out. If you can't empirically measure it, it doesn't really matter. It's called a bias. It weakens the research, take it out. But we're finding out that the reason why we don't have enough Indigenous people at these tables is because to be at the table, sometimes we require that we abort our heritage. So what we're saying is, no, we're not aborting our heritage. We're not aborting our spirit. In fact, we're bringing our spirit to academia. In fact, our spirit is going to reform academia. In fact, more people we have spirit connections, and the more the spirit is involved, the ability and the capacity to meet and understand, we don't have to agree. We can actually disagree, but we can recognize that people have stories and values that we can, that, you know, when that's brought to the academic process, we create stronger graduates. So I want you to think about that. Now, we're at the Ho'ina is Noinoi's canoe left Kailua, and when all this, all her essentials went with her, and her essentials manifested and grew, took bigger form. And you collected everywhere you went, you put things in your kete, and now Noinoi is 71 years old, and her kete is bulging with experiences, and we value. Many of us are beneficiaries of her journey. I am one. And I'm proud to say that I have benefited from her journey. I didn't always agree with her, but I agreed mostly with her. Or we figured out how to agree together. But we grew. And we grew in, you know, it was just a very, very strong connection. And sometimes the support we need cannot come from family. It has to come from someone a little bit outside of the family. Isn't that interesting? That sometimes our support got to come from the family, but sometimes it's too close. And if what we need is not something the family appreciates, then they're not going to give the support. And in fact, if they never go on a journey, it's hard for them to promote journeys. That's why Pele could force Hi'iaka onto her journey, because Pele went on her journey. And that's why my mother-in-law is so forceful. You want to share space with her, she can force you on a journey. And she can put you in a forest, and she can tell you chant. And sometimes she leave you, she forget you in the dark and you're chanting. And she's wondering, who's that chanting in the bushes? That's her student, yeah? So your Ho'ina, your canoe has come back. We've benefited through WIPSI, through the academic forum, through the hula conferences. through Lala Kea, through the political alliances that you have to negotiate. I want you to, if you could spend, we have nice time. Now we want to take this whole journey. So you have a journey of Noi Noi, and there's chapters, yeah? And now we want to look at the chapter of the Mauna. So we want to focus. Now we're going to be looking at how the Mauna. So the Mauna is not your journey. The Mauna became a place where your journey constellated. Yeah, it was a space that brought it all together, and it was raised up higher. Now let's look at the Mauna as a controlled space. Can you speak to us about your essentials? How were your essentials played out in your contribution to that community on the Mauna? How did your journey, all the things that you collected those years, big jobs, small jobs, difficult jobs, complex jobs, simple jobs, all of them, the years of being in a canoe, living in villages, coming back to school, not being the youngest in the classroom. Yeah, and having to put extra effort into, because the brain sometimes take a little bit more jogging to do to to build up stamina for that kind of concentration. Now, all of that, how did that play out? So your canoe is landed. Now you're on the Mauna. Can you give us a day in the life of Noi Noi and the Mauna, and what did the Mauna do to trigger, if not amplify, some of your journeys?
So, okay, great. So, the Mauna was, while each of us have our stories, if you spent any time, whether you were on the Mauna or connected to us through technology, because people from far places were able to connect on a, virtually on a daily basis. Everybody has a story about their connection, as do I. And so the one thing about the Mauna is that the Mauna was in control. And that's the first thing you had to understand when you were there. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, the Mauna is the reason, the source, the leader, the determiner of how we were going to act and how we were going to be in order to achieve what our collective purpose, which was and continues to be to stop a particular project from being built on the top of the mountain. But my story today is not about that or the reasons. It's about the interaction between myself and the many, many thousands of people who got to experience being and living on the slopes of Mauna Kea at the upper regions, because many of us live on the lower slopes. Yeah, so we live in Hilo. We're impacted by the presence of the Mauna on this island. But for the first time, for 9-month period, a bunch of us got to actually live, really, whether we drove up every single day or spent the nights there. We got to live in this space where there really was no historic record of a village existing before. And what existed there was a village. And a village in every sense of the word, about just like family dynamics, but on steroids, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it. The one thing I think that really made a huge difference for us is that we were, no matter where you came from, and no matter what your individual connection to the place, that when we were able to gather 3 times a day in protocol, we were all able to focus ourselves on one singular moment, and that was in that space of dancing and chanting and being and getting out of your physical body, and into the spirituality of why we were there. So that's really important. And I also, before I talk about myself, I want to acknowledge others who are on this call who played huge roles to make our stand successful. and successful when measured by the fact that I don't know how many thousands of days now since 2015 when the project first tried to bring equipment on the mountain until this very day. Uh, but we've been successful in stopping the project thus far, and who knows how long. But we're continuing to stop the project. For me personally, you know, I when I went to the Mona, it was actually with as a member of a group of Wahine who have been practicing and training under Antipua Kanahele to do and perform ritual on Mauna Kea for the protection of Mauna Kea. And so we have been doing this for at least since 2015. And some of us just, that was a particular focus of this one group of Wahine practitioners, that many of us have just been students of Puakarahele for many, many years before that in chant and ritual. So so my first engagement with Mauna Kea was really as a member of that group of Wahine who participated in these rituals kind of on a regular basis every year, even in between the two stands that took place in 2015 and in 2019. When 2019 occurred, I was first there along with Luana Neff and others because we had planned that ritual. We had planned a Sunday on July 14th when we were going to hold vigil, 12-hour vigil from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. at Pu'uhuluhulu, where we would go in front of the ahu and we would do chants every hour on the hour. And Pua Case was very much a part of that. Pua, I think this might still be here on this call, listening in. So I just really want to acknowledge her because she's a big part of all of that. How I became recognized, perhaps, I don't know, by others, not, I never called myself that, but as how I became recognized as one of the leaders isn't so much about being a leader, but perhaps maybe being a spokesperson. So as we gathered on the 17th, for example, of July, and then I was sitting with the kupuna on the road with Antipua and a number of others. And then that big event happened that day that I'm sure we all know about, you know, when the kupuna were arrested. We were there for that. I was there for that. And then they asked, the media was all there, and they asked who could make a statement. And really, I turned to our kupuna and I said, you know, somebody want to make a statement? And they said, oh, just go talk. You go, and you go talk to the police, you know, and tell them we're not leaving. So I said, okay. And I did. You know, that emerged. That wasn't for me personally a purposeful thing that I want to stand up and be recognized as a leader. I think that just kind of emerged. I was there at that space in that time, and then being one of the younger kupuna, because some of our kupuna who were arrested were in their 80s and 90s, and I was in my 70s. Right, well, actually, I was 69, so a little bit younger, but you know, they sent me forward to do the work. And so when your elders tell you, you go and you do that, that's what you do. You stand up and you go. So I did. And over time, I still am asked to provide statements, to do interviews. I know I have been photographed and interviewed by journalists and writers from Hawaii and from around the world who came to the Mauna to find, you know, to discover for themselves what was happening. And so that is how leadership emerges, I suppose, in that sense. So, you know, it's always hard because we as by our nature, we don't want to stand up and go, I'm the leader. No, none of us were the leader. There wasn't a leader, there were leaders. And People stood up when the opportunity arose to do what they do best. And every opportunity called for an individual or a group of individuals to step forward. And what was remarkable about our stand on the Mauna is that leaders emerged everywhere. The people who came up and knew how to cook and how to cook for thousands of people became the leaders in the kitchen. The people who were first responders and knew how to organize those kinds of things became the leaders of the medics and the Mauna medics. The people who knew how to gather the couple aloha team together and to work with people from all walks of life for their function, they became the leaders of those of that function. The people who ran the aha, that was you guys, that was Kekuhi, yourself, and your children, and Lanakila, so Kawila, Lanakila, many others who stepped up to the mic, literally. They were the leaders of that function and held that together, right? And so that's what leadership was. There is a need, and the people who had the talent and were present at that moment stepped up to the plate. And so am I one of those leaders? Yes, I suppose I am. But I am not the leader by any means, because it was a village of leadership
Right.
that stood.
A village of leadership. So I'm doing all of these things that she's saying. One of them is she says that there was a need and the people with the talent, stepped up to meet that need. That it was a village of leadership, people that could cook, that could do everybody, you don't experience that too often, where people are just, you could tell that people there was a very strong common call, and people were able to relax their own egos to just meet that call. I'm not, and not to say that there wasn't the human glitches that got in, that, there were many human glitches, but bigger than a glitch was the movement. And those rituals were there. I mean, I woke up every day and I packed up my car with all my hula stuff. See, because I like to dance, and I only want to dance. That's all I want to do. I had to go to the Mauna to make sure my mother-in-law wouldn't get arrested again. I don't know what I could do, but she's my Mauna. But so what am I going to do on the Mauna? Well, they need rituals. They need people that can understand how to reciprocate spiritually and words and dances. So I'll pack up my car with all of these implements, because you also got to, part of the ritual is you got to keep the rituals went on. Some rituals went on so long that it went into the other rituals. I felt like sometimes I just felt like I was moving even when I wasn't moving. And so I would pack up the car and I was refreshing all my old dances, because, it's time for those dances to come out. That's what I realized at that moment. And you might benefit from this. Those moments when you're at a profound intersection and you realize that there's a need and you can meet the need. And you step up to the plate and you go, and this is what I tell myself, I was born for this moment.
Mm-hmm.
I was created for this. Nothing else matters. All of it constellates here. And then all those things I put in that kete was not just per chance. I created there was a design that I learned these things. And so I would pack up this car, but I don't like to show, because you don't want to be too showy, yeah? So when the people come with the gifts, or they're coming to visit, they're doing these chants, and then you got to listen to them, and then you got to figure out, okay, what in your repertoire can you do to reciprocate that? Then I would tell Lani Huli, my niece, Lani Huli, run to my car, bring my hoi. So she'd run to the car, bring my hoi, I dance the hoi dance. The next group, Lani Huli, run to the car, bring my poo. So finally she said, Uncle, can't I just bring all your things to the mat? I said, I don't want people to think this is that I'm so prepared, it's so embarrassing, but it made beautiful opportunity for people to contribute something. And I think, Noi Noi, that was the beauty of the whole movement. And, you know, we're looking at your story, but your story is just an entry into our own stories. And, you know, and if you did not experience the Mauna, then, you know, experience a Mauna-like community. You'd be surprised. There's Maunas all over the place that we have to protect, you know. And Mauna doesn't necessarily mean just a mountain. It could be the Mauna of your family, your community, you know. But we have a little bit of time for questions. If you have particular questions that you would like to ask Noi Noi directly of her journey. Now, we have 5 more minutes. If you have to leave, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being part. Thank you for biting the hook. I hope the next time you look in the mirror, you have a nice conversation, you know, with yourself. Ask yourself the question, hey, how's your storyline going? Tira? Brother Mok, how's your storyline going? Where did I leave off in my chapter? Have a candid conversation, because nobody's going to have that conversation with you. That's your kuleana. I want to thank you for helping to build a safe space. Mōkaulele has become a safe space so people can share their vulnerable chapters of their life. So let's grow this. We have to give birth, guys, to our next generation. It's not enough to be of a nature. We have to nurture that nature forward. And so, you know, let's not push it all on our kids. We got to take that kuleana ourselves so that our kids know how to take that kuleana. So if you have to leave, I see you next semester with a lineup of Mōkaulele. But if you can stay a little while longer, and if you have questions, Noi Noi, would you oblige us with answering some of those questions? Any of you have questions or comments that you would like to ask Noi Noi? And if you're too shy, then you can always email her, yeah? And she said a couple of times that she don't identify as a leader. So that's one of the things we need to remember about our kind of leadership. When we stand up, we say, I'm the leader, then, you know, a number of us will put our heads down, because leader is how we define somebody else's actions. We don't define our own actions. It's for somebody else to recognize. Yeah. In fact, sometimes when they call us, who wants to lead? We all put our head down. But if they say, who know how to make imu? Oh, some of us going to look up. Yeah. So any questions do you have? Any echoes, anything? You're all shy? Do I see anything? Now, before you do leave. Oh, Amy Stillman. Hi, Amy. Can you unmute yourself, Amy?
Oh, okay. Aloha. Yeah.
Hi, aloha.
Aloha,
Hi,
Noi
Amy.
Noi. Thank you so much for sharing so much. And I just want to echo that something you said is something that I've been saying every chance I get, you know, is to get to the table and to realize that there are not enough of us at the table to make the decisions that need to be made. And, you know, to keep in mind that whatever table you're sitting at, there's almost always going to be another table where decisions are going to be made that could very well override the decision that's been made at your table. And so the challenge is to just keep, I think, pushing and reaching for those seats at those other tables. And that's the hardest part, I think, because so many people, you know, I'm closing in on retirement. It's on the horizon now, you know. So I've been in this academic game. I've seen many graduate students, visionary. I've seen many assistant professors come in with all kinds of ideas. And then for one reason or another, many of them don't make it. You know, and I think we really have to ask how we can increase the numbers who are making it to the next table and the next table and the next table. Yeah, but just to keep saying, there are not enough of us yet at the tables where decisions are being made. And that's really important. So mahalo.
Thank you. So I just want to finish this frame of thought, Tangro, if you let me, with one thought. I'm retired now from the university system, which gives me the privilege of spending my days and nights fighting the system in the way from the outside, not because it's a bad system, but because when it comes to the Mauna particularly, and right now, I don't agree with the university's position. But I continue in my retirement to do whatever I can to push graduate students toward those upper levels. And so I'm fortunate to be asked fairly consistently to review master's and PhD thesis papers so that I can mark them and help them reach their pinnacle or their graduation, their achievement of their goals. And I've been privileged to do that for Hawaiians as well as for Maori students. And so in my own way, I continue to push our people and the indigenous people on that pathway. And, I talk to so many groups of students. I continue to guest lecture and talk to people about what was my journey and my passion when I was working at the university, which is to stay in school and to reach for that higher goal, that it's more than just what happens to you right now and today, but that what you can do would be better for your family, better for yourself, better for your community. And we have to do it together.
And that would be the ha'ina. Yeah, and that would be what you leave, the storyline, the last verse. What does this all boil down to? It boils down to the point that we need to create a village of leaders so that we can sit at every table necessary to keep and not just maintain a balanced environment, but create a vibrant. Our birds cannot be dying from malaria, those mosquitoes anymore. Our mountaintops, what can we do to contribute to that? And because we cannot be at all the tables, how do we grow the capacity? How do we make room? How do we nurture? And knowing that some of our own students come to us from a very traumatized, their own families are sometimes their trauma. So sometimes we become their family. But it's their storyline. So what we do, we can either help them create sad songs and sing those songs all their life, or how do you take those trauma moments and create victorious battle songs and march toward that, to that goal of vibrant Hawaii. That's the honor that we have. And on this platform, there are a number of scholarship awardees, young Hawaiians in academia, and that's what we want. We want them to stop. They need to be part of this conversation. So they get out of the idea that coming to college is just to get a degree. Coming to college is an opportunity. It's not the only opportunity, but it is an opportunity to position yourselves at tables where decisions are. I don't want to spend my life answering questions. I want to create visions, and that's what we want, because sometimes the questions they ask us to fix not meaningful, bad. So I don't want to spend my life fixing things. Yeah. So this is great that we have our senior elders, in academia, so they understand the journey. And then, but to get our incoming ones to see that this is where it's at, guys. It's not just about getting a degree. It's not just about 15 to finish. That's a saying we say, 15 credits to finish. It's about knowing your story, knowing your essentials, and how you can contribute those essentials to the benefit of our indigenous Hawaii. And again, we all have 24 hours every day, 24 hours to do big things and small things, to not just maintain Hawaii, but to create a vibrant Hawaii. And so with that said, Noinoi, I want to say mahalo anui. And thank you for spending time. We should have another episode on Mōkaulele on our adventures, Noi, Gail, and myself. Traveling Aotearoa, Samoa, I don't know where else we went, and the
Japan.
the humors of it all, and how we learn. And again, that's the thing. Every class, whether you like those classes or not, whether you like the instructors or not, has something that you can put in your kete, and you're gonna need it. You're gonna need it in the future when you're at one of the tables and they're gonna ask a question. We need this, and you will be the only one equipped with it. What are you gonna do? You're gonna walk away from it, or you're gonna say, I was born for this moment, and you step up. So, ladies and gentlemen, my dear Mahu communities, if any of you are here, I want to say mahalo anui for joining Mōkaulele. Noi, thank you for sharing your beautiful story, and happy birthday. What a great legacy you leave. Not that you're near death yet, but you know, I'm not going to wait till you croak before I start singing your, you know, the benefits you bring. That's, you know, yeah, I'd rather sing it now. And I do. Thank you for helping me through some of my own crises, identity crises. You know, I want to belong, and finally I belong, and then I scared of the belonging, you know, and you had to help me hold my hand and walk me through it, you know. So you at one time were my sister, sometimes you were my mother, and sometimes you're my buddy. Yeah, so thank you for all of those moments. And sometimes you just gave me a headache, but that made us, I'm sure I gave you a headache too. So we balanced there. But guys, go home. Ask yourselves your question. What's your bigger call? It's not just about getting a job and paying rent. There's more to life than that. And we got to do that. Please do that. Please, however you sustain your lives, sustain it well. But there's something bigger than that. Yeah. Don't get dizzy on the spokes. Get to the axis of your calling. Okay. Get to the axis. It's less dizzy there. I want to mahalo Gail Makua Kane London. Gail, can you raise your hand from the Kipuka? And she's threatening me with retirement for years. And so I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do without her. But maybe it's time if I step up to the plate, but I don't like step up to that plate. I only like dance hula. I don't like do administration. Amy, to our Amy Stillmans, you know, our Hawaiians in academia that, you know, found it very lonely sometimes. Only your shadow to speak to. Every time you have to revalidate yourself just to get a conversation, you know. But if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. Let's give birth to leaders. When you hold your mo'opuna, yeah, you know, ask yourself the question, what am I doing to nurture this person? Yeah. If you're gonna feed them and change the kakadaipa, might as well ask the question, what am I doing to contribute to this, to the development? You know, when you hold your children and you hold your partner, you know, ask your question. Is it his or her responsibility to define how I lead, or is that my kuleana? People are more willing to support somebody that has a vision. Yeah. So get your vision together. If you've neglected your vision, pick it up. It's still there waiting for you. Okay. Get it together. And not that I have my life perfect. My life is far from perfect. But I love waking up because I love what I do. And I love knowing that I matter. I make changes in people's lives. I'm not a big pohaku in the heiau. I'm one of those little pohakus that help contribute to the big pohakus. And I have to know that I'm valuable. Because if I don't know that I'm valuable, then nobody else will know that I'm valuable. So, you know, I'm not a big pohaku, and I don't want to be a big pohaku. I like being the small ones. Yeah. And so I don't care what kind of pohaku you are. We need big ones and small ones. Sometimes We cannot even see the pohaku, but they're there. We contribute to the foundation. Mahalo, we have this is a beautiful time in Hawaii's history where we are making changes. We've never had to fight for a mountain like we're fighting today for a mountain. We never have to fight for fresh water like we're fighting today for safe and fresh water. But that fight is worth it because it's our fight and nobody's going to fight it for us. So let's give birth to great, healthy, and smiling fighters. Hug your mo'opuna. And if you don't have mo'opuna, that's all right, because there's a mo'opuna down the road that's needing your hug.
Somebody else's.
Somebody's kids that need your hug. They need you. You're born for them. You were born for them. Okay, not only for yourself. Congratulations to us all. Mōkaulele has been successful. And keep the stories going. Yeah. Thank you. Noi Noi, can you stay on board, please? Ahui ho. See you guys next semester.